Former Galway hurler Tony Óg Regan joins me on the show today. He now is one of Ireland's leading high-performance coaches, and he's worked with multiple All-Ireland winning teams, and he's also just released a book called MVP, Raise Your Game, Unlock Your Potential. How are you doing, Tony Óg?
Great, Kevin. Thanks for having me on.
No worries at all. It's a great book, and like I was saying to you just before we started recording, I just finished it this morning, and I think it's something like loads of useful information for players that they can take from it and apply to themselves. I'd imagine it's the sort of thing you would have loved to have starting out in your early days playing with Galway.
Yeah, I think it would have helped with a lot of the mental distress I put on myself at different times and the pressure and expectation and, not managing, multiple playing fields, we'll say, in terms of career and family and friends and trying to balance a high level sport as well. Particularly in my 20s, I would have mentioned in the book maybe that, burnout was a big factor for me there around 23, 24, and it probably led to me, failing exams and failing my contract as a chartered accountant and ultimately been let go from the senior county squad at that age as well. And, I definitely would have loved to have this practical, relatable book and exercises that would help me kind of navigate that a bit better.
And I think it's something that like any player is going to resonate with. You don't have to be playing at the top level to go through the things that you would have went through. You talked at times about losing your love for the game and feeling that obviously your mindset would have really prevented you from playing well and took the enjoyment away from it a lot. But it's not just like, it's never a straight line for any player. Your career, even if you are the most talented player, you read any sportsman's autobiography and they'll talk about tough times they went through. But it just goes to show that I guess people on the outside as well will never see what's the inner turmoil that can be going on in a player's head when he takes to the field, even in Croke Park in front of 82,000 or whatever.
Yeah, and listen, there's always challenges, both expected and unexpected at times that, as I always say to people, you're coaching the person first and to understand that personal background. Very, very few athletes go through their career without having some setback, and that can be sporting wise where it's not been selected, it's injured, it's been dropped off the team or a loss of form. But off the field as well, dealing with, the pressure of exams, maybe trying to start a new career, trying to get promoted in the career, maybe family or friends getting ill or sick or something happening there, conflicts or tension in your own relationships. So you're trying to navigate that and, energetically be at a very high level for training and be clear in your thinking and clear in your focus going into big games. But, often there's a lot of things outside your control that you kind of have to manage in the background. And sometimes I was good at compartmentalizing that and not letting it affect my focus going into bigger games. And there's other times, it absolutely affected me in many ways, mentally, emotionally, physically. And, you weren't at your best then. And, when you're going out against a player who's extremely well prepared, extremely focused, and maybe doesn't have that unrest in their lives, well, then, straight away you're probably at a disadvantage.
Just one line that really struck me was when you said life felt easier when sport was going well. And again, I think that's something that a lot of people will resonate with. And obviously, as an inter-county player, the amount of time that you have to put into it, it's a huge investment. Your whole life has to revolve around it. But things aren't going well then, and the self-worth you might attach to being an inter-county player and to performing well, that's when it's really difficult for players because you're putting so much time into something. And then if you're not performing for whatever reason, it can be very difficult to get yourself out of that.
Yeah, and I think, perspective was something I was really lacking in my 20s. And, I only saw myself as that county hurler and that athlete. And, my successful week was built around, training really well and trying to perform at a really high standard in the weekend. And, when it didn't happen for me, there was times there if we got knocked out of the championship, it could be, 3 or 4 months of a depression afterwards because I hadn't put any worth or value on Tony the son or Tony the brother or Tony the friend. I hadn't put any worth on my career really. Like it was just, fourth or fifth in my priority list. And I didn't acknowledge some of the achievements that it was happening for me on a daily basis around those areas. And, didn't really practice things like gratitude around what I had in my life. And it was all what I hadn't. And my mindset was quite negative and, focused on the success of sport. And, that's going to deliver the happiness for me and me feeling enough, I suppose.
Just to give a bit of background then from, say, your early playing days, like you were involved in Galway hurling panels since you were around 13 and would have shown a lot of promise, I think, when you were young, played in your first All-Ireland minor final, and you were disappointed with how you played that day. You felt that it was probably the first experience where your mindset might have held you back a little bit. And then you fast forward to an under-21 final against Limerick a couple of years later. And again, you had a bit of anxiety and doubt going into that game. you were taken off, was it after 20 minutes? Maybe it was early on that day. So all of a sudden then you were starting to doubt, can I perform in these big national finals? It was just something that, from performing really well at underage, and then next thing, a couple of games, things didn't go well. And then this thing builds up in your head where it's like, in big finals, I don't perform.
Yeah, and like that's the amazing capacity of our memory. Like it can focus on those past experiences that haven't gone well, and it can bring us back into that emotional state we're in. And unless we do some work in terms of, recognizing that, reframing the story around it, visualizing ourselves at our best in our next experience, well, then it can repeat. And that's very often when I got back in those earlier days when I didn't know how to do that kind of work. The same emotions come up for me heading into the under 21 final. I've had an injury going into this. I'm not ready for it. I've missed 5 weeks training, and I wasn't able to acknowledge the 45 weeks previous to that and the work I'd done. And, it was all, my mindset was focused on what could go wrong and mistakes that could happen, and the failure that, it could lead to. And, total wrong mindset going into the match, and, wasn't able to think clearly when I went out the pitch, and, lucky to last 20 minutes really. And then, I can remember the next week, probably been embarrassed about it, not going into college, not going into lectures, avoiding meeting people. And, same happened again then when I got into the Galway seniors. We got to a National League final a year after that again, and played well all the league matches up, scoring heavily from midfield, and involved in my form really good. And then, the story kind of came up around the minor final, what happened, so the one final that happened, and, it's going to happen again today. I don't perform well in finals, and got pulled again after 20 minutes. And, like really was questioning myself then in terms of my mentality, and was I lacking something, or was there a weakness there? And, like thankfully then started working with a sports psychologist, John McGuire, and really helped me around that and framed that right. And, started reading sports psychology books in the season in 2005 where we got to All-Ireland final. And, I started working on things like affirmations and visualization and self-talk. And, they really pulled me through those, negative moments leading into matches and during matches when mistakes happened, that it didn't pull me down, and I wouldn't go back to that emotion and that story from those minor matches and those under 21 matches in that league final. And that was fierce important for me enjoying those bigger occasions, and getting more out of my potential as well in those days.
And if you were working with a player now, I know you work with a lot of teams. If you were working with a player who, say, they felt they didn't perform well in county finals, or maybe big games like that, what kind of stuff would you be doing with them, or what way would you approach that with them?
Yeah, it's to understand their sources of pressure first. So there's probably pressure comes from probably three expectations we have. The first one, our own expectation: can I handle or can I cope with this situation? And you may not have played in a county final, or you may have played in that county final and not gone well before, but there'll be aspects in there that you did well in terms of your preparation, and aspects in there that you did well in the game. So it's trying to recognise that I can hold on to them, and I was consistent around them in the last county final, and we recognise that. The other one is around scrutiny then, like what will other people think of me if I fail? And we work through that, like who are the kind of critics that pop up when you have a bad match that you worry about, or come into your thought process. And who are the people that really love and care about you in terms of your friends and family, and will they be there whether you win or lose a match? And it's again perspective, Kevin. Like you're not going to be the most successful person on the planet if you win a county final, and you're not going to be the biggest failure on the planet by losing it. And life does go on after it, and there may be another 9 opportunities to win a county championship. There may be never one again. Like, we can't predict the future. It's about recognizing that some of these judgments we have from other people, we're never going to change 7.5 billion people opinion of us, whether we're a success or not. So success is down to us, how we frame it, and what's a successful performance. Yeah, winning is an outcome we can get from it, but what's the performance and process that I would help deliver that success? And that's what's in my control. And I kind of zone in with that in players in terms of the mindset or mentality you want to bring into it. So like, what's the key mentality that you want to bring to this situation? So it might be a word like honesty, composed, dedicated. What's the behaviours that would show that, and the lead into it, and in that match performance? And I lock into those things that are in my control in terms of those behaviours. And the last piece then might be around consequences of losing. So let's talk about that. So you lose this match, right? potentially there's 100 scenarios that could happen. You might, as I said, play in another 9 or 10. You might play one again. What would life be like if you won it? What would life be like if you lost it? And rather than, bury that down somewhere and suppress it, let's actually talk about those scenarios. And then we focus on, right, if we did win it, what would that be like? And we try to get the mindset focused on that and visualizing on that, and, sharing that fixture with friends and family, and the positive emotions and that. And, visualize that for the 3 or 4 weeks going into that county final, and get us into that state of mind that, this can go well. And I'm really looking forward to that, and mapping my mind and brain to that pathway as well. So, when you look at those kind of expectations and you manage those expectations, we can move from that fight or flight or freeze mode to more like acting, where we're more aware, we're clearer, and we're more task focused. And that's what we want players to be, that we're aware of the present moment, we're clear on what we can control and can control in these moments, and we're just focused on the task at hand, whether that's having your breakfast on the Monday prior to it, or it's in the warm-up 5 minutes before the match, and I'm just focused on that kicking process. And we're not getting too far into the future, and we're not going back to past stories that we weren't successful or didn't work out, or we're not good enough, or we're not capable. So, there has to be a strong kind of internal story in your head, and you have to kind of build into that over the weeks leading into it to get that mindset mentality right for success.
One thing I noticed as well, just from reading your story, was you were never afraid to go looking for outside help and for extra help in different areas that you sort of identified that you needed. So you would have worked with physios, a local physio when you were dropped from the Galway panel, and there was a sprint coach you worked with, and then, as you mentioned, John McGuire, Jerry Hussey, you would have forged a relationship as well, and then Fran O'Reilly, a life coach. So over different stages of your career and life, you identify different areas that you needed extra help with, and you went after that, which I think is admirable as well as a player, not just to think it's all you, but I guess that must have really helped you over the course of your career and just life in general.
Yeah, listen, I think when I've been open myself up to being vulnerable and say, I don't know all the answers here, I'm struggling at this, I find this hard under pressure, or I find my energy isn't good when I'm training, I need to improve whatever it is, carbohydrate or protein take, I'm losing weight. So my S&C coach, my nutritionist, I always see them as, brilliant resources and helps to have in the squad, and, would be once or twice a month having individual conversations with them around, the blocks that we're in and what to have prior to training, after matches to recover better, inflammation, all those aspects. So, any resource that was in the environment, I would look for that help and realize that these coaches add huge value to your preparation and your life. And, fortunately, you mentioned, two sports psychologists I had as well, but they opened up my perspective and my lens to mental fitness, mental performance. And I had so much growth in that area to go, and understanding my tendencies under pressure and my belief system and my value system and all those aspects. So, every player, I think, if you can have that humility, that vulnerability in you, that you don't have to have all the answers. Coaches don't expect you to have all the answers, and actually, seek out that feedback. And, is there stuff here I could consider that could improve me, both from a personal point of view, a lifestyle point of view, a sporting point of view. And, there's fantastic resources out there, both within teams and outside of teams. And, I've had nothing but, positive impacts with spring coaches like Gary Ryan and Fergal Garrity and other physios who've, massively helped me in terms of flexibility. I've tried yoga for years and found it massive in terms of not just, physical flexibility, but mental clarity and mental flexibility as well, and still practice to this day, and meditation and all these things. So they're fantastic resources to tap into.
Yeah, and I would find as well when I coach people, S&C, when they go looking for that outside of that, and then they've put in a few months' work on their own, and then they come back into the team environment maybe after an off season, and there's just there's a little difference in terms of even their mindset, because they have gone after something themselves and they've worked on it, and then when you see the changes that has brought about for you, that can be a massive boost to your confidence as well.
Yeah, I think that work you do on your own, that you've kind of autonomy and choice around, and you're working on individual things that are going to improve you, whether it's around your speed or your flexibility or your mentality. It does give you an extra sense of belief when you go back and start pre-season, and you do have a newfound edge to you in terms of your confidence as well. Like, so, at different times during the season, to have those people you can link in with, even just for reflection on what's working well, or is there one or two things you could add to your routines on a weekly basis to help I talk a lot about these different things in my chapters, whether it's process versus outcome, and you go deep into your preparation there, or you're looking at things like intensity versus recovery. And most athletes I know, they probably don't need to load more video analysis, more S&C, more running sessions, more conditioning sessions, more skill sessions. They need to probably look at recovering better. And, there's definitely loads of modes we can do that in terms of the mental recovery, the emotional recovery, the spiritual recovery, and the physical recovery. And, sometimes we all just look at the physical recovery in terms of getting on the bike or whatever, but, there's lots of things we can tap into in terms of meditation and naps and, being by the sea and all those things to kind of return ourselves to homeostasis and a bit of balance again, internally and externally.
Yeah, and even I remember you were talking about working with, say, the likes of Limerick hurlers who they would train at a high intensity, but they also recognise the need for balance in their lives. And it just brought me back to a story I remember. It could have been Shane Dowling talking about after training sessions, John Kiley used to bring in an ice cream van and they'd sit in the pitch and have ice cream. So while it may not be optimal for your nutrition, there's something about switching off and the recovery aspect that great teams or great managers have recognised that that's really important as well.
Yeah, like if you look at a pillar of mental health, it's around relationships and, positive emotions. So, you're after a great tough session, your endorphins are high after a session, you probably, cortisol and adrenaline running through you, and you're having a laugh and a joke and an ice cream with people you really, bond with. And there's a lot of, oxytocin, which is that love and connection hormone. There's dopamine and serotonin, which are happiness hormone, reward hormones. So your system unknowns to yourself, sitting in the middle of the pitch, having a laugh, licking an ice cream and chatting to each other. But there's recovery happening all around you and there's well-being happening all around you. So it's kind of those, whatever you want to call them, interventions, but they're important to, perspective again, like, we're doing something we love with people we love and we really enjoy it. And when we do that, learning, growth, success, happens a lot faster in my experience anyway.
And I want to go back to your own career then. You obviously broke through to the Galway team. You had a bit of success early on. You played in an All-Ireland final, were nominated for an All-Star. And then you had a couple of, maybe a season or two where you weren't performing to your best and you felt things slipping a little bit. You were dropped off the panel then. Can you just talk about those couple of years then? There would have been a few tough times on and off the pitch personally that you had to bounce back from.
Yeah, I suppose I was fortunate, got into the seniors at 19 and, my first season made my debut in league and championship and it went quite well. And, that, like, for me, when you look at lads now, it can take maybe 4 or 5 years of a panel to get there. So I was quite fortunate that Conor Hayes was manager. He was over my Fitzgibbon team and he backed me and supported me for probably the 4 years he was there. Like, and, we won a National League, got to an All-Ireland final in his third season and we're unlucky enough not to, push a bit harder in that final in terms of winning it. And, Conor left then in 2006 and I just started as a trainee accountant in September 2005. That was a 3.5 year contract and a new regime came in. Gerard Lamb was there with his management team and they had a new way of doing things and they pushed us very hard for the first pre-season there. I'd say we did 3 months solid of running for 3-4 times a week. And it was intense, 2-hour sessions, 2.5 hour sessions. If you're looking at it now from a sports science point of view, it's probably way off the mark.
Yeah.
I remember I was playing the All-Ireland final in 2012 at 94, 95 kilos, which is about 14.5 stone. When we finished pre-season that year at the end of January, before the start of the league, I was down at 12 stone, so
Right.
it definitely didn't suit my body type. And, over the 2 years, Kevin, not surprisingly, I ended up, tearing a hip flexor, pulling a hamstring and, having lots of other little niggles as well because, the gym wasn't a priority and came in the second year then out of nowhere. And we often trained like Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday back to back and no space in between sessions, no recovery and a long day Saturday then as well training. So I find it very hard energetically. And then, I started my first kind of professional contract work-wise as well and professional exams alongside it where you had study and lectures at the weekend as well. So, as I said at the outset, burnout happened for me at the end of that kind of cycle where 2007, 2008, I was exhausted. I remember at one stage, my final exams, we got like an 8-week block for study leave and I was just there going, God, I don't even know how I'm going to open a book. I'm so tired here. And then the first morning, getting my folders out, putting them at the edge of the bed and pulling the blanket and the quilt up over me and just saying, right, I'm going to try and study from the bed because I was too tired to get out of bed and sit in a chair. And I remember I couldn't even read a page of an accountancy book. I felt so exhausted, and getting even the thought of how am I going to get to training tonight, like, and try and do a session with Galway. That's where I was kind of at that point. You know, I remember breaking down after a couple of sessions, actually bawling my eyes out. I'm so exhausted
Aye.
here, and I just felt I was going further and further back in the pecking order, and you know, ended up pulling a hip flexor and playing the first round of the championship match with it, and you know, subsequently been out for 6 or 8 weeks, and you know, getting back towards the end of it, putting up the start, and then you know, even 2008 then played in a National League final against Tipp. It didn't go well for me. I had a good league up to that, but again, you know, the old demons came in across me for that league final and went out totally full of self-doubt and worry and anxiety, and underperformed and conceded probably a goal and 3 off Larry Corbett, and you know, didn't see any game time the rest of that year as well. So you know, to get dropped in that winter from the Galway squad, in hindsight, it was probably a blessing, because you know, I was probably burnt out and exhausted, and I probably needed that year to, you know, re-collaborate and you know, look at how am I going to get my exams, you know, what do I want to do career wise going forward, and you know, just getting off the treadmill inter-county training for that pre-season as well, and those couple of months probably helped me both mentally and physically kind of restore myself and get my energy back. And by the time April, May came around, you know, I had an appetite for the game again massively. I went in with the Galway Intermediate, played with my own club actually in April in the championship, and then there was obviously a big break that time to September, October when we got back. So having the Galway Intermediates there, we were training with senior club players, playing inter-county challenges against other intermediate teams and under 21 teams, just kept me sharp. And you know, thankfully through all that work with Gary Ryan and the physios and the Óg and nutrition side of it, showed decent form in the club championship as well, and met John McIntyre and got back in. So you know, in hindsight, that year was probably the making of me in terms of the next 3 to 4 year block with Galway, and going to another level in terms of my performances.
And another thing that struck me, you actually had to reach out to John McIntyre just to meet him and say, I want to be back in there. I believe I'm good enough to go back in as well, which is another aspect that I think some players potentially would not make that move. So that was like another important part, that you actually backed yourself. And even when he said, look, you're my fourth choice centre back, you didn't just walk away at that stage, which obviously, you know, at the end of the year, you were starting centre back, you were made vice captain. So it all worked out well, but you had to show a certain aspect of, I guess, stepping outside the comfort zone and saying, I'm going to meet him and I'm going to back myself as well.
Yeah, listen, like hugely nervous reaching out for that call, because you know, all those consequences in my head, like he mightn't even want to meet you, he mightn't even rate you, you know, what would he even think of me picking up the phone to demand a meeting with him, like, and you know, I'd nothing to show for that previous 12 months in terms of the club didn't, you know, we got knocked out of the quarter-final stage. Galway got well beaten by Cork in the All-Ireland Intermediate semi-final, and, you know, probably hadn't much to stand on. But again, I had to go back to previous experiences where, listen, I said, you know, I've won minor, I've won an All-Ireland Intermediate, I've played in an All-Ireland Senior Final, I've been nominated to an All-Star, I've been a Fitzgibbon All-Star, you know, and these things, and saying, right, I've proven I've done it at this level before, like, and I know I can get back to that level and above it again if I get a bit of back in here, like. And I know that the 2 or 3 years previous with Gerald Nan just didn't suit my body type, and the regime just didn't suit you know, what I needed. You know, I just laid it bare on the table, and I said I didn't want to have any regrets, like wondering, you know, if I didn't have the meeting, would he call me? If I did, you know, if it gave me a 1% chance getting back in there, I had to do that, and I had to show my passion for it and my want and desire to get back in there, because it was totally an unfinished chapter for me, like, and I didn't want my career to be finished at 24, 25. So, you know, whether it changed his mind or he was going to call me in anyway, I don't know, but I think it was really worthwhile doing for myself, even just to, you know, bare my soul a bit and let that off in terms of, you know, how I felt about playing with Galway and what it meant to me and what I felt I could offer the squad. And I didn't want any guarantees whether he'd start me or anything like that. It was just going in there and challenging and competing and backing myself that if I got in there again, I would compete and get a place on the team. And that's what I tried to lay bare to him. And, you know, thankfully he rang me probably within a week or 10 days and said, I think the term he used was he had a wild card, and maybe each one of the management team had a wild card where, you know, you had your set 30 picked and everyone could throw in a wild card, like the Ryder Cup. Maybe, I don't know, John Mack would like his betting and different things. So someone had picked me as their wild card, thankfully, and got in. And the only guarantee is that you're in for the pre-season prior to the league, and it's up to you to show it, and you will get a chance in the Walsh Cup. And I went in there in really good shape, and really energised and really looking forward to it. And the training was good. Like, with Fergal O'Callaghan, who had been the Munster S&C coach at the time, and he was just brilliant for us. It kind of went from there in terms of doing that really meticulously. And I was hurling most nights in the alley just to make sure my hurling was really sharp for January. I want to be championship ready for the start of that season. And once I got in for that first game, I just kind of took off, and it went well for me, and we won the Walsh Cup, and he picked me for those 3 games. And started the league, then I had a really good game against Limerick, and he acknowledged that in the dressing room in front of the whole group. So little things like that were key turning points for me, and were built into winning the league that year. Getting to Leinster final, and Tipp unfortunately pipping us by a point in the quarter final, and denying Kilkenny the 5 in a row that year. So a lot of satisfaction in terms of not being on the panel to getting to that point where you're back nominated for an All-Star, and John Mack asked me to be vice captain then that winter as well. Was further validation of that conversation I had with him, and backing myself, I suppose, that I could cut at that level again.
There was a huge difference in you, I think, from reading what you were saying, from, say, your early days on the panel, your first stint on the panel, and where you would have talked about being uncertain and being worried and judging yourself critically as well when you underperformed, to when you get back in, you described feeling that your mindset and your body were in sync for the first time as a player, and between 2010 and 12 would have been your strongest years as a Galway player. So what was the difference there? What about your routines and working on your mindset that helped you to actually get there? What were the little things that you would have focused on that helped you achieve the best few years of your career?
Yeah, I think first thing was, I suppose, to eradicate outside opinion for me. So, social media was kicking off at that time. I would have been, stupid enough to be reading forums and stuff like that really kind of upset me at times. No doubt about it. I believe some of them as truths, I suppose. Reading newspapers, and some of that would be praiseworthy stuff like as well. And I found that had softened me in the past too, and I didn't prepare as well then going into other matches. So I would have got off all media, and just really focus and zone in myself on my own preparation that week, what my mentality would be going into the match. And I talk about in the book, I wanted to be confident, composed, and committed hurler, and that was my self-talk throughout the week. And those are the behaviours I worked on around that. Visualisation 3 or 4 times a week, working on meditation, working on reset routines when I made mistakes in training, that when it happened in a match, then it was very automatic. I just made myself calm and clear through breath work and reset routines. And affirmations the morning of a match, I used to write up a script of how I wanted to play, and it'd be really, really positive orientated in terms of my attitude, my intensity, my effort levels, focus on 3 or 4 points in my role. And I'd write them in the present tense, positive affirmations of how I was going to do it, and what I had as a player in terms of my skills and my mentality, and what I'd done well in the past, and what I was looking forward to doing well in the future. So my mind was so clear, so confident, so calm going into these games, that I was just really looking forward to some of the excitement rather than fear, which previously was a lot of stress and worry around what could go wrong. I totally flipped the switch, and it was more what could go right today, and what I'm looking forward to around today, and what I'm looking to do well today, and what I'm looking to show, and focused on key things that were specific to my role, and very positive orientated and very controllable. And so it might be attacking the high ball, communicating with my other defenders, moving into space to support my teammates, and I'd focus on those 3 or 4 anchors throughout the game to keep my mind on the present.
And just talking about the reset routines there, you were talking about one game against Tipp in the quarter final when Shamie Callanan scored a goal off you, and you were able to reset straight away. You obviously reset body language, made eye contact with the keeper, but it was just a sense that I'm in control here. And then you use your Rafa Nadal line as well, Vamos. So you were you had obviously you learnt all this stuff, like you said, worked on it in training, and then you were able to put it into practice then on the field and recover from that mistake pretty quick.
Yeah, that was critical, Kevin. When I go back to 2008 in that league final, I conceded a goal that day, and I crumbled in my head, this is the worst performance ever. I've let the lads down. We're going to lose this game. This is what be remembered. and on negative narrative. But, when that goal got in, it just showed my development in the space of 2 years with the work I'd done mentally, that, I was able to just zone in on the present moment through breath work, and regulate my heart rate and come into a calmer state, get clear on, okay, it's one mistake, it's one moment, what's important now, and, just get back into the flow of the game. And having that self-talk and that belief system worked on continuously for, the guts of 12 or 18 months, I was able to quickly flip the switch on that and not let it derail the rest of my performance. And it just, for me, showed my kind of mental and emotional maturity, and the importance of that work, that, it didn't let a goal disrupt me, or something like that disrupt me. And, even when Owen Kelly tried to run up and remind me as well about it, I'd say he was staring into space, really, because it was just, I wasn't reacting to him. I was responding to my own routine and what was in my control. And he could have lit a fire in front of my face that day, and I was just calm and composed, like.
Yeah, that's the way to do it, because I know I've played against players as well who they're very reactive, and they're almost in that flight response where they could do anything if a player did that, but it's almost more um, intimidating for the opposition player when you're just like stone cold looking ahead and you're not reacting at all. And he goes, "What's up with this guy? Like, he's on another level here in terms of his mindset."
Yeah, and it takes a while to kind of, train your response, because a lot of us are reactive and impulsive when we do get triggered like that. And people do, try to intimidate us, whether it's through verbal or physical. Our flight response can kick in, or fight or flight. And sometimes worse still, we go into freeze mode, and we become, totally passive and freeze in the moment. So, to be able to regulate yourself through your breath and your self-talk and where you put your attention, then, that shows that we can train a response to any stimulus. And, that's the power of the work, I suppose.
I want to get on to just a few examples from teams you've worked with as well, that you would have talked about in the book. But before you do, you mentioned social media there, and obviously it was only kicking off, as you said, when you were still playing. But from the players you work with now and teams you work with, is it a big issue for players, do you think? Are they still reading a lot online? Like, obviously everybody says we don't read the media and stuff, but players do look at social media in particular, and people have a direct access to their inbox essentially if you make a mistake in a game or don't play well. Is that a concern in the modern game now, social media? Because it's quite hard, I'd imagine, for players to stay away from altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and all we can do is educate people in terms of, right, if we see something about ourselves enough, and that thought starts to form in our heads, and, we read something 10 times, and that thought then becomes a belief. And, that could be that, you're complacent around your capability, or the opposite is where you're really negative about your capability. And, we need to be conscious of that, and we need to be conscious that players have lives outside of sport as well, that they are a person. And, if you're reading enough of negative content about yourself, I don't know anyone on the planet that it wouldn't affect, mentally and emotionally and physically as well. Like, so I know a lot of players would, get off their apps, off their phone for the entire summer, the entire campaign, because, they need that headspace. You have enough to contend with, managing your mood and mental health and these aspects without, reading negative stuff around your performance on the sports field. And, worse still, people making comments around your personal or private life, or whatever it might be. Lots of people make mistakes in general life, and sports people make mistakes in general life. And, it can be hard hitting online in terms of Twitter and these stuff like that. So, I think players are now sensible enough to recognise that doesn't help with their mood and their mindset and their preparation. And, although it's not probably possible to ignore it all, because, friends or family will share links onto you, or someone will make a comment, you can do things to kind of protect yourself. And, I'd also say, if you do read something, you still have the choice over how you interpret that. And if you want to value, a critic outside the arena that doesn't know you personally and doesn't know the work you've put in and doesn't know your capability because they haven't trained with you or seen, what you're capable of, well then, you need to kind of look at, why you're seeking that outside validation from someone that hasn't been in the arena, or doesn't know what you do, or don't know what your capability is. And I think it's really important for all of us, whether you're, working in business, or you're working in sport, or you're performing in some arena, that, who are those credible sources you go to for constructive feedback. And that's what we should be really listening to, rather than, outside noise, who, generally they're trying to watch a game and there's too much happening. They don't have any stats or analysis, or they haven't watched the game back. They don't know what your role in the team is for that game. So to be taken at face value from, a pundit or someone on the sideline who maybe hasn't even watched the game, at the level you have or reviewed at the level you have. Players really need to kind of look at those sources and say, do I need this in my life? And, what's it going to add to my preparation or my happiness or my mood going into games?
Mm. And just continuing on that point, sometimes with teams, say if you lose a couple of big games, all of a sudden then you're seen as a mentally weak team, but you might have just been beaten by a more talented team. And I'm using the example of the Tip hurlers when you worked with them in 2016, and they had lost a couple of All-Ireland finals. They had been hammered by Kilkenny by 12 points, possibly the year before, or 2 years before, and they lost the semi-final narrowly the year before in 2015. But there was a sense that they were a mentally weak team from the outside, and that did seem to affect them as a team. Then you talked about that they would have had a bit of tension and tightness in games, that they weren't performing skills to their full capabilities or performing to their best. So if a team is in that state, if they're a team that are potentially seen as mentally weak, what can you do? Or maybe use the example as Tip, what did you do with them to actually get them out of that and to ultimately win the All-Ireland that season?
Yeah, I suppose the boys were probably looking at me arriving in as a former Galway hurler, and my first night speaking in the dressing room maybe, and sharing with them, everything I loved and admired about them. And I meant that sincerely. Like, I think they'd been a great team for, the guts of, from 2008 on, when I went into them in 16 with Jerry Hussey. I'd watched them for 8 years and really admired them. Like, they'd pushed Kilkenny in 8 and 9 like no team had ever done it before. And,
Mm.
up at the '09 final, I felt they should have won that game. Like, PJ
Yeah.
Ryan pulled off 5 world-class saves, really. And, the penalty that wasn't, and all those factors, like, so it
Mm.
wasn't as if, they were a bad team getting blown away. They were actually, outperforming Kilkenny in a lot of those matches and scenarios. And, even in the 14 final, I thought their first performance, the first day, I said it to them, was probably one of the best All-Ireland performances, in the last 10, 20 years. Like, and I meant that. They hit an incredible amount of scores and, defended really well and played a brand of hurling that was just outstanding. And, Aim O'Shea obviously involved, that was no surprise. So, like, it was going back to those prior experiences with them and recognising that, there was good in there, that they did really well. And, they arrived at All-Ireland finals, so they're not a bad team. Like, and, there was a couple of things they could probably tidy up on in terms of, managing their mentality under pressure and, managing that outside noise in terms of maybe listening to criticism a bit much and how it was affecting them. And that was for individual players as much as the team. Like, and we just tried to really focus on the strengths of the group. And, this was a new season ahead. And, there are a couple of younger players that actually started to come through and really come strong as well, like the likes of
Mm.
Cathal Barrett's and John McGrath's and Mikey Breen's. They're really starting to find their level at Intercounty as well. And, when you factor then in the Paudys and the Brendans and the James Barrys and the Shamie Callans and Noel McGrath's, geez, like, there was such a strength and depth, like, from, even 1 to 20, like, there was a great bench there as well. Like, and we just tried to, create that belief around themselves and the team, create the right energy in the group in terms of, a positive energy, a fun energy, one of joy and enjoyment. And, we took them outside their comfort zone on different aspects of that during the year to, connect the group stronger in terms of group sessions and outdoor work as well. So, there was great buy-in from the management, great alignment with the players and leadership from the players on it as well, and a great openness to the things we threw at them in terms of, visualization and other aspects as well. So, that's how we try to, I suppose, recreate the belief system there and recreate the identity of the team there, and just get them to tap into their own strength and their own magic.
Another one I want to touch on was Harry Ruddle playing with Ballygunner, and you're talking about basically the difference between an optimistic outlook and a pessimistic outlook. So this is a player who would have been a squad player, hadn't featured in the All-Ireland semi-final at all, and had played about 15 minutes in the Munster final, but he was sitting on the team bus there, and he was quietly optimistic, I guess, of his chances of playing well and impacting the game. And then he obviously came on the last few minutes, scored the winning goal in the dying seconds of the game. So can you just talk about that kind of thinking style and maybe relate it to him and how it helped him impact the game in such a big way then and win the All-Ireland for Ballygunner?
Yeah, and I think for anyone in life, an optimistic thinking style is something you trained, and it's really, really important. So the two lenses I look at it, we're going to have setbacks in life and we're going to have things, failures or whatever you want to call them. And, how we explain that to ourselves is really important. So, Martin Seligman has done great work around this in positive psychology, but the 3 Ps of a pessimistic outlook is that when you lose a game, this is going to be permanent. We're going to be deemed a failure all the time, and we're going to be useless. It's going to be pervasive, where I'm going to allow this failure to go across all aspects of my life, and I can't be a success at anything. And then, it's personalizing it, that it was down to me, and it was my mistakes, and I let people down, etc. So those three P's kind of frame us after setbacks, in terms of feeling really stuck and maybe staying helpless or hopeless for an extended period, or even often cases all our lives. Whereas, the optimist after that setback, Harry didn't get picked or didn't come on in the semi-final, only come on in the Munster final. He saw that as something that was temporary, that the next game I can come on. Specific that management felt the first 15 or the first 17 delivered really strongly in the semi-final, but that doesn't mean they might need me for the final. And, it wasn't personal to me that there was other people on the subs bench that had come on in maybe 4 or 5 other games that year started, but weren't using the semi-final. So he didn't say it was just down to me and my lack of ability, that, management viewed it that way. So straight away, he was framing, that semi-final and not been involved as not something that was, going to stay the way it was. And I had a chance now to prepare really well for the final, and I could, come on in this game. Someone could get injured. I might be needed to start from the outset. So going in with that positive expectation into the final helped him prepare really, really well. And we talked a lot in the year about, people making an impact, whether, that was the management team, it was someone in the backroom team, whether it was helping out with the water, whether it was sports psychology. We're all there to make an impact and help the team get better. And, I think we all bought into that kind of we rather than I and me. So we and us as an approach to, team identity. And, Harry was using that word, even talking one-to-ones with him that week around, I'm going to have an impact on this All-Ireland Club final. And whether that's my energy and my mood infecting the boys prior to it, whether that's my energy and intensity in the warm-up, when I do get on the field, I'm just going to, kind of go for it. And he did have a huge impact, and, his frame of thinking really helped with his energy levels and his clarity when on the field. And such a marvellous way to win an All-Ireland final.
Yeah.
And, such a memory that, I think will stay with all of us for the rest of our lives. And, it was such a great experience for all of us.
Yeah, I remember being at that game. I don't think you'll ever have as exciting a finish in the last seconds. Like, it was just, even the distance he struck it from, like, it was unbelievable. The final one for you, Tony, I am interested in, like, you essentially lost your intercounty career twice. The first time you were able to get back, but then the second time, again, you probably felt that you still had a bit more to give, and it was ended. It wasn't your decision. Was that tough to lose it a second time when it's out of your control, and this time you're probably thinking, I'm not going to get back in? And then secondly, what would you advise the players who are going through something similar, where it's a big part of their identity since they were very young, they wanted to be an intercounty player, and then it's gone and it's not going to come back? So it's kind of a two-sided question. First, like, I guess, how did you find that? And then what would you advise for players?
Yeah, listen, I was 29 when 2013 season finished, and just hit the 30 mark around that November, and probably got the call from Anthony to say, he'd been looking at my form the previous 12 months, both in club and county, and felt, he wanted to bring a few younger lads through, and, I'd be moving on, kind of thing. And, felt huge disappointment. I was driving down from Dublin. I just started a certificate in sports psychology that time on a Wednesday night, and, I remember ringing them back again about 15 minutes later and pleading with him to even just go in and do the pre-season and try and change his mind, but he wasn't for changing. And just huge disappointment, because I felt I was probably physically, in the best position I had been compared to when I'm 20. Like, I knew how to get my body right, my mind right, food wise right, fitness wise right, and technically, tactically as well. And felt I had a huge amount to offer the squad. Like, so, I honestly was 2 to 3 years trying to get over that decision. I think going back to college and studying sports psychology, doing a master's thesis around that career transition and that athlete identity and that loss, and I talked it all around in the different chapters, was really, really helpful for me, and a bit of healing for me. And, going back working with the Galway minors and the Galway senior footballers during that period, and the Galway under-21 hurlers, I was kind of back with my own per se, and helping out at that level again, really helped me. But I think, to answer your question, I think as a player you kind of have to, look at other aspects of your life and where you're going to put that 25, 30 hours a week now, whether it's back into your club, whether it's, looking at new career goals, and whether it's new relationship goals, whether it's new health goals, and finding that thing that gives you that kind of purpose and meaning outside of maybe playing intercounty hurling. And that can be roles within the club, it can be roles in the community, it can be, bringing that ambition to your work role, those transfer skills to your work role. And, I think saying yes to things that are new and different for you as well will help you to, navigate that a bit better. But, acknowledging there will be times of, and I talk about it in the grief model in one of the chapters as well, where, at the start there's kind of a denial and I can't believe this has happened and why was it done to me? And, I might go into a depression then for a while before I start to move to a place of, acceptance and reintegration into a new life and a new identity. So I would feel our identity is kind of something that we can change and alter as we go through our lives, and we can define what that identity looks like and what our priorities and interests are going forward and what we're passionate about. And, although I couldn't play inter-county again, I could help out in coaching, I could help out in administration in my club, both as juvenile chairperson and senior chairperson at different times. And, obviously when I work through sports psychology as well, I can help in schools and businesses and sport as well. So it was about, adding value and having an impact in other areas and kind of recognising myself that I had other talents that I'd learned through sport and inter-county sport that I could help share with athletes and, ordinary people as well, I suppose, that are navigating those challenges like I had in terms of their career and maybe unemployment and, not happy in a career and, dealing with mental health challenges as well through life. So that's what the book is really about, putting, those challenges into chapters and making them relatable to people and giving them exercises to help them move from stuck to getting momentum to move forward. And I think a lot of the chapters will resonate with people, not just from a sports point of view, but personally as well, to navigate those inevitable challenges that life throws at us.
Yeah, exactly. And I will link the book in the show notes as well. But like you said, I think it's something that players will find massively beneficial, and especially, I guess, starting on it at this time of year is ideal. So it's not something you're trying to cram for later in the year, but you can actually put all the actionable things that you have in there into place and just get it as part of your routine. I think it's something that would help players massively. How has the reaction been to the book since it came out?
Yeah, the 9th of January, I think we had the launch, and it's kind of flown from there in terms of the promotion and media side of it. Listen, I got such gratefulness really for the turnout I had at the launch and the book signing and the lovely messages I received from all over the country online and through WhatsApp and stuff like that. So it's been really, really nice, and I'm just glad that I put the book out there, and I know it'll have a huge impact on people's lives, both personally, professionally, and sporting wise. And I just can't wait to dive into it more with other people in terms of coaching throughout the year as well.
Well, listen, Antonio, thanks very much for coming on today. It's been brilliant to chat to you, and best of luck with everything going forward.
Kevin, thanks a million. Really appreciate it.